Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm so happy you're here and want to share with you really some background on and tools you can be using when your business feels hard, when your business feels heavy, when your business feels unsustainable or dull. This week, as I've been working with clients, I can tell you a good handful of them told me that it's feeling hard. They're in a season of really feeling like this is a slog in a lot of ways. And to those consultants that I've talked to who aren't my clients, who are thinking about becoming my clients or just wanting some help in a 20-minute call, this is a common theme. And it might be the time of year. As I'm recording this, it's April, kind of the newness of the year has worn off. It also might be, just the general state of our world and a lot of heaviness happening there. But also, I want to say that this is just a normal part of doing business. And I want to share with you today a process that you can be using so that number one, it is a normal part of your business and that's not a problem. And then also how to get out of this kind of rut where it feels really heavy and hard and unsustainable. And you might be questioning, what am I doing here? This is feeling insane. So if you feel like you're in this spot, I encourage you to sit down and write out with me as we go through this process. I'm going to walk you through 4 tools that you can be using when you get into this space. It might not be you right now, and that's phenomenal. Or it might be where you're at the moment, and this is just what you need. And that's why I'm making this episode, because we all hit these patches in our business. And when we hit these patches, it's normal in life as a human. Sometimes when we hit these patches when we were in corporate, we would just go find a new job or take on a new project or transfer somewhere. But in this case, you're running a business. And unless you want to go back to corporate, which I don't know very many of us who do, from a true, genuine place of wanting to go back versus feeling fear or using it as a solution to it feeling hard or heavy. If you want to create a sustainable business for yourself that where those cycles of it feeling heavy are shorter, where those cycles of it feeling hard, you know how to move past and through them. That's what I want to share with you today. So I'm so glad you're here. I hope this is just what you need to hear, because I know for so many of you, this is a spot that you're in. And quite frankly, I'll share with you a lot of my own personal examples here today, because this is a spot that I get into a lot. And I made mistakes early on in my business where I would make some pretty drastic changes to fix the problem. And I want to make sure that you're not making that same mistake that I did as well. Because it's a lot. If you go into that path of trying to fix this problem of your business feeling hard or heavy or unsustainable by making drastic changes, you're never going to move past that kind of plateau. And you might be getting a lot of dopamine hits from it, but you're definitely going to just kind of keep recreating the same results over and over again. And I don't think you want that. I think you're here because you want to grow your business. And of course, it'll evolve and change over time. I'm not saying don't do that, but don't make drastic changes because that's what you think you need to do in order to fix the problem of it feeling hard or heavy or unsustainable. Today, I'm going to share with you some tweaks, minor changes, and most of them are in your thinking. So, really, nothing kind of logistically has to change at all unless you want to, in order to start creating more lightness and ease and get back into that place where your business feels exciting and energetic and creative and impactful. So, that's what we're talking through today. I'm so thrilled you're here. And Before we dive in, I want to remind you or share with you, if you're hearing this for the first time, that there's a companion tool that will be really powerful for you to use that goes along with today's episode. And that is the independent consultant's scalability assessment. So if you head over to the URL to the website, icscorecard.com, so that is the two letters IC and the word scorecard.com, then you will come to a page where you can take an assessment. It's not a quiz, it's like one of those fun ones that gives you your personality. It is an assessment of your business. I don't know how many questions. I think it's around 15 or 20 questions. And it will give you a really good assessment of where to start and how to prioritize building out more sustainability and ultimately so that you can scale without it feeling so hard. So go take that scorecard. That's a great companion to today's episode. Again, the URL, we'll put this in the show notes. It's at IC, so the two letters, independent consultant, IC, scorecard.com. All right. So hopefully that will be a great additional resource for you. Let's dive into today's topic. We'll start out with the agenda. We're focusing on what to do when business feels hard. And I'm going to walk you through 4 tools that you can use when your business starts feeling hard. And I'm going to use a lot of examples here today, but primarily for myself. I don't need any permission to share examples for myself. So I'm going to share with you an example from my own business that happened late last year. And hopefully you'll gain some really good insights from this because it's a real life example. And if you're a current client or someone who's talked to me on a Zoom call, a lot of this may sound familiar. And the reason why it sounds familiar is because, as I said a little bit earlier, so many of us go through these patches. And you are not alone if this is happening for you too. So I think that's so important to know because a lot of times we think we're the only one experiencing this, we're the only one who can't figure this out. And that's just not simply the case. But what is the case is that you can't avoid patches in your business where it feels hard or unsustainable. At least I know from 11 years that's the case, unless you're kind of coasting and reproducing results, same kind of results every year over year. But if you're in the zone where you don't want to be coasting, nothing wrong with coasting, by the way, but if you're in the zone where you want to grow your business, you want to make more impact, you want to do higher level type work, like more strategy, less execution, where you want to be making more money, then this is really important to be able to build up the skill set to recognize earlier and to shorten the cycles of when business feels hard or unsustainable. So that's what we're going to work. I'm going to walk you through those 4 tools. I will use myself as an example. And then at the end, I'm going to summarize this formula for you, what to do when business gets hard. So you can pull all of this together into a process you can use for yourself. All right. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to walk you through each of these 4 tools. I'm going to describe it and give you an example here. So the first tool that is really important is to get curious about the root cause. So, first, kind of the trigger to this is you feeling kind of blah, feeling dull, feeling heavy, feeling like it's an uphill climb. Those are the kinds of feelings that I'm referring to as I say when business feels hard. You just kind of notice this hangover almost. You notice that things aren't feeling as exciting as they were before, or you aren't quite feeling as motivated. You're kind of forcing yourself to do things. So that's the space that you might be in. And when you get into that space, again, not if, but when you get into that space and you're asking yourself things like, is this worth it? I can't keep up the pace. The tool here is to get curious about the root cause of what's occurring. So let me give you an example here. I was working with myself on this and with my own coach on this. As I said, late last year, it was starting to feel kind of like unsustainable over and over again. And as we started to, at first, it felt like a logistical problem. Like I have this calendar, this is what my goals are to kind of balance work time, client delivery time, and time with, things that I want to do personally, mostly family things. and spending time at the swimming pool, as I've shared with you before. I spend a ton of time my kids' swim practices all year round. So, anyway, I kind of feel like the math isn't working. And I was working through this using a process that I teach my own clients called self coaching. And in that self coaching, at first it just felt, like I said, like a very logistical problem. I think I can't keep up this pace. Let me figure out how to fix my calendar. That was my thought process. But as I started digging into it more, again through self-coaching and ultimately with my own coach, I realized that the problem was not the calendar at all. It wasn't the logistics. I mean, certainly I could shift a few things around to make it a little bit more doable. But at the end of the day, really figuring out and asking the question that worked so well for me was, why is the calendar this way? Why is the calendar getting into the state that it's getting into? And I realized I was doing some kind of overcomplicating things, we'll put it that way. And as I was peeling back the onion, it came down to a couple of things: fear of saying no, agreeing to almost everything, wanting to be incredibly helpful. But at the end of the day, what that was doing is diluting, going from a place of being afraid to say no, wanting to be helpful to everyone who asks, or sometimes people who don't even ask, wanting to be helpful, wanting to, figure out a way so you're not having to say no. Ultimately, what that ends up doing is diluting the impact and creating a dynamic where you're not being helpful, right? And I've learned this lesson many, many times over the years, and I'm sure I will learn it again. But I'm getting faster at noticing when I get back into some old habits and doing this process to redirect. So, the tool here, as I was sharing that particular personal example, which I know so many of you can relate to, we have a hard time saying no. We worry about saying no to the client because what if the client decides, they don't need us anymore? We worry about saying no to the client because we worry about, in an extreme, are they going to cancel our contract and talk to other people and ruin our reputation? It can get so built up like that in our mind, right? And so this is a very common scenario where consultants get into this trap of wanting to be helpful altruistically, and also because we're worried about what the impact might be of saying no. And so then pretty soon all of those yeses build up and you end up diluting and spreading yourself too thin. And then you start questioning, is my offer wrong? Or is what can I do to my calendar? Or what should I change about my contracts? Or what subcontractor should I bring on to help me? When in fact, the very first tool that you want to be using is figuring out the real root cause of the problem, which is not your calendar in this example, but why is your calendar that way? And when you figure out why is your calendar that way, then you can apply a more appropriate fix to the problem. In this case, for me, the fix was I just had to get back into my zone of rebuilding my mindset, refreshing, I'll use that word, refreshing my mindset about saying no, about only taking on certain work, about what my response times are, and getting back into that place of being much more impactful versus just automatically by nature on autopilot saying yes. And so for you, that may be the same, where you want to use this tool to get curious about the real root cause. The real root cause isn't how many clients you have. The real root cause isn't what your clients are asking you for. The real root cause isn't that there aren't enough hours in the day. The real root cause of you feeling like your business is hard or heavy has to do with why things are the way they are in your business. And so that's what you want to go figuring out so that then you can address that. So that's the first tool, getting curious about the root cause so you can address the quote unquote right thing, the what's under the covers creating this dynamic versus just addressing the dynamic. That doesn't mean that you can't make changes like I was just describing to your calendar, for example, some of the logistics of it. or even bringing on an assistant or a subcontractor. I'm not saying don't do those things, but what I am saying is you want to really understand what the true root cause is before you start implementing the solutions to it to start making your business feel lighter again. Okay, the second tool that you want to use is what I call finding the facts. So, this is very much related to what we were just talking about. Find the facts. When you're thinking your business isn't sustainable, that you can't keep up the pace, and asking, is it worth it, as an example. I looked at my calendar at one point and I think there were 10 calls on it. It's kind of crazy. Just networking, client calls, just 20-minute calls, helping consultants. Who knows what was on the calendar, thinking back to it, but that's generally what's on my calendar. And I looked at the calendar and I just thought to myself, just automatically, right? Like, this is not sustainable. I cannot keep up this pace. And you might be in the same situation where I'm using this as an example, right? There may be other reasons why you're thinking your business is heavy. But one of the common ones is just literally looking at the calendar and thinking, I have no time. I have no time for things that I need to work on my business or more strategic things. I'm literally on calls all day. That's an example here. And so the tool here is finding the facts, perception versus reality, because our brains are designed as a confirmation bias to prove ourselves right. So if we're just running around in the world thinking this isn't sustainable, we're going to find all the evidence about how that's true. So there was such a talk track going on in my mind about how this isn't sustainable. So as a result, I was looking at the calendar thinking this isn't sustainable. I don't have enough time for everything. But when I stripped it down to the bare facts, and I will tell you, my third grader helped me with this, which is kind of embarrassing, but it was so fabulous. Afterward, told him, wow, you just coached me and you didn't even realize it. But I don't even know how we got on the topic, but I was explaining, the next day to him and how many meetings I had. And it was like, I have, I don't know, 10 or 11 hours of meetings. And he was really curious, like I'm describing to you, find the facts. He asked me, well, how long are each of the meetings? And I told him, some are 20, some are 30, some are 50, some are an hour. And so then he just asked me a few questions. And, to me, it was like 10 hours of meetings because I had 10 meetings. To him, when I gave him the math, he's broke it down and it was only 6 hours of meetings. On the calendar, I was just counting the number of meetings, feeling like this isn't sustainable. When he broke it down, even, the 50-minute calls, there's 10 minutes remaining. When he broke it all down for me, it was 6 hours of meetings. And that day, I think it depends on the day, but that was an 8-hour workday for me, 7 or 8 hour workday. So that left 1 or 2 hours of work that of open time. So that was so helpful because number one, I figured out the facts. What are the facts of this? It is not that I have 10 hours that is blocked off. It is that I have 6 hours that is dedicated to whatever is on my calendar. And then I've got 2 open hours if you add it all up. And so then I was able to start figuring out, where do I do client prep time? Where do I eat lunch? Where do I work on things like the podcast in those open 2 hours? Now, obviously, I'm not going to work on the podcast when I have a 10-minute window, but I can definitely eat lunch in a 10-minute window. So then what happened is I found this 2 hours of open time, and my brain immediately started arguing, saying, it's too exhausting to fill in that time. It's too exhausting to fill in those little 10-minute or 20-minute or even 30-minute open times. Those all need to be breaks for me. And so then I asked myself, why would I need a break? And my answer was to myself, as I started peeling it back more and more, I realized that was so often I was thinking during the day, I'm not doing this right. This is going to take me a long time. Whatever the things were that weren't the calls. And so when I would look at my to-do list that I wanted to fit into that day, in addition to the calls, I realized that no wonder that it was feeling hard or heavy, because I was thinking, I'm not going to do this right. Of course, I'm going to need more time than 10 minutes. Of course, it's going to feel so heavy and difficult and like pushing a boulder uphill because I was just having this talk track of I'm not going to do it right unless I have a lot of time to do it. And that's just simply not the truth. But again, sharing with you this personal example, my goal here is to help you to see that it's just so important to break this down to the facts of the situation. So once you have the true facts and not just your brain kind of running on autopilot, giving you perception versus reality, giving you the story you tell yourself over and over again, I think I personally have thought about I need a lot of time to do things correctly for such a good chunk of my life. I think back to even middle school. Going on a tangent at the moment, but my middle schooler who's 6, he never has homework. He does it all in his last period of the day, which is called a tutorial. And it's designed to do homework in this period of the day. And he never brings home homework. And I was like, this makes no sense to me. I remember back to middle school, I would have hours of homework because I had this thought process that it takes a long time to do something correctly. And so knowing that, and my brain likes to go back to that, it's a well-worn neural pathway in my brain. I know that that's what happens. And so, really looking at this, finding the facts and saying, I've got 6 hours of calls and I've got 2 open hours. Some of them are, it's comprised of 10-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute chunks. I can get so much more done than I thought I could by knowing the math of it, which is the facts, and also the fact that I'm overcomplicating this, making it feel harder than it needs to be because of this talk track going on in my brain. Often, since I was 12, probably, I need a lot of time to do this correctly or I'm going to do it wrong. And so, as a result of finding those facts, then the conclusion that you can take and the next steps you can take from this type of a process, there may be some adjustments you want to make on your calendar. I did and also work on the mental side of it, which is redirecting from it takes a long time to do something correctly to thinking about I can do a great job. I can do exactly what I need to be doing in smaller chunks of time in these little pockets. And it doesn't have to feel heavy. It can feel light and easy. And I don't need to like take breaks because I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted because I'm putting all of this weight on my shoulders about doing things correctly, meaning that I need a lot of time, that I'm worried about doing things incorrectly, that I'm worried about doing things wrong. That's what creates such a mental overhang and therefore making business feel so much harder than it needs to be. So hopefully that example gives you a really good illustration of how to apply the second tool, which is finding the facts of the situation. And you don't need a math whiz to do it. That was actually pretty simple math. I was just super impressed that he did it when we were in the car. Okay, we'll move on to tool number 3. Tool number 3, he did it in the car in his head without a piece of paper. That's what was impressing me. Okay, tool number 3, normalize. This is a simple one. Sometimes you just have to say to yourself, you know what? Their business has normal ebbs and flows. Nothing has gone wrong. It is not my business's job to create excitement for me. When I'm giving my business the job of making me feel excited, this is what creates this dynamic I shared with you. I did earlier on continuously starting over. You kind of get to the place in your business where it doesn't feel so new and fresh, whether it's a brand new business or you've just taken on a new client or you've kind of started down a new path of maybe doing more strategic or advisory work and things feel new and fresh. And then that wears off as it does with everything that's new. And then you start thinking business is hard or heavy or dull or not exciting. And so then if you go down the path that I've made, so this mistake I've made several times, now I catch it. I want to help you catch it too. If you're constantly looking for your business to create that dopamine hit for you or that excitement for you or that motivation for you, then you're going to constantly be making changes in your business to create that excitement. But that's not your business's job. It's not your client's job. It's your job. So the normalization tool here is twofold. Number one, it can make it feel lighter just merely by recognizing that this is normal. This is an ebb and flow in a business. This is not something that has gone wrong. So sometimes just merely acknowledging that is enough to start lightening your business and starting to move back out of that zone where it's feeling hard. On the flip side, you also have control to make it feel lighter. And the control to make it feel lighter comes from the first two tools that I gave you, which is getting curious about the root cause so you can address that, finding the facts so you can address what's the true facts versus what your brain is thinking is a fact and it's not. It's a pattern that you've had, and building up your mindset in a way that doesn't create this heaviness where you're thinking this is hard or I need to do this correctly or I might do it wrong. If I say no, the client will cancel our contract, whatever it is. And so that's the key here from a normalization perspective is to recognize for yourself. It can be as simple to lighten up your business and not make it feel so hard by acknowledging that your thought patterns right now are making it more challenging. And there may be some facts of your business that are making it more challenging too, but making sure that you know the difference between a fact and a perception. And then just acknowledging that for yourself and acknowledging that you don't need your business to create excitement for you. That's not its job. Okay, the last tool is to regenerate motivation, to rebuild motivation, to purposefully create ease in your business. So, this is a little bit of pulling everything we worked on together. But the tool here is asking yourself different questions. So, now that you've used several ways to get to the root cause of what's making things feel hard, then you can take this last tool and put it in place, which is to purposefully, intentionally regenerate the motivation and the lightness and the ease in your business. And so that can look like making some logistical changes that can lighten the load. I think for me, I just, made my Acuity calendar a little bit more strict in terms of networking calls and that type of thing and shutting and spacing out my consultations a little bit. And that helped a lot. And also working on the root causes, which are those things like people pleasing or wanting to be needed or worrying about being right or thinking it takes a long time to do a good job. So you want to be thinking about how do I address the math, the facts, and how do I address the root causes? And so the tool here is to ask yourself really powerful questions because a lot of times just our questions by default are things like, why isn't this sustainable? Why did I get myself into this position again? Why is this feeling so hard? Those are not good questions to ask yourself. And you've heard me say this on the podcast before. We want to be asking high quality questions, which is this tool number 4. How can I make this easier? How can I do something quickly and it be really high quality? How can I say no to the client and that be a benefit to them instead of causing stress and worry for me? Why have I been unwilling to do this before? Or why have I fallen back into the trap of being unwilling to say no? What would need to change about my business to make it feel easier? What can I change about my thinking to lighten up my business, to regenerate that motivation, to make it feel easier? When you know the root causes through those other tools, then you can start repositioning, asking yourself really high quality questions as a business owner so that then the solutions that you come up with are so much more impactful. Again, there may be a combination of some logistics to lighten up the business and make it not feel so hard. You might decide I'm going to shift my offer slightly. So I'm not selling as much kind of longer term engagements. Again, we're not making huge shifts, not incremental shifts, but also it's got to be coupled with you working on the way you're thinking, because that's the main thing that's causing this heaviness in your business. It's whatever that inner talk track is, that inner critic going on that's telling you this isn't sustainable, this is too hard, I'm not doing a good job, I don't have enough time to do a good job. Those are the things that are making it heavy. And so that's why I am so much emphasizing today, you've got to address the talk track in order to make your business feel lighter. So, as we wrap up here today, to summarize here, the root causes may seem like a full calendar or having to juggle all the responsibilities. You're everything from the consultant delivering the work to the salesperson to the marketing person to the CFO to the CEO. You're all the things. That might feel like what's making your business heavy. It might feel like that you don't have enough time to do business development. It might feel like a challenging client is making your business heavy. It is not those things. It's the layer under those things. It's the inner critic. It's the stories you're telling yourself. It's the patterns that you've had, like the one I shared starting from middle school. And because that's the root cause of why your business is feeling so hard or heavy at any given point in time, the tools that you're going to want to implement in order to start lightening up your business again. And I shared with you my own personal story today because I've been doing this for 11 years. I'm a coach too. By all intents and purposes, people might think, well, that shouldn't happen to you because you know better. I think that sometimes too, which is, by the way, not helpful either. But we're all human here. And we cannot avoid, as a business owner who puts themselves in situations that are oftentimes challenging, that are out of our comfort zone, it's impossible to avoid completely feeling like the business is hard or getting into these cycles, these ebbs and flows. Thing you want to focus on is not avoiding those, because if you try to avoid them, you either get into a phase of starting over, or you get into the phase of just making yourself really small, doing things that feel comfortable, that you've done over and over again, that you know you can accomplish without making it feel so hard. And I don't want you to be bound by those things. You don't need to be constrained by either starting over again to feel better or to, make your business so small that you're really not accomplishing the bigger picture here. That's what today is about. So to summarize those 4 tools, you want to get curious to find the root cause. You want to find the facts as a way to get to the root cause. Separate out the facts from the perceptions. You want to normalize this. It's not a problem. Don't judge yourself for being in the situation. All of us get there. And you want to intentionally generate motivation and ease with higher quality questions that you ask yourself, and rebuilding or refreshing your mindset in a way that your thinking creates the ease in your business. So it is possible, so possible, and it can be very quick to get yourself out of a phase where business feels hard or heavy or unsustainable. All right, my friend, thank you for tuning in today. As we wrap up, I want to remind you to go take that business scalability scorecard. It's at the URL IC, the 2 letters IC, scorecard.com. So independent consultant, IC, scorecard.com. And if you want help figuring out what your particular root causes are, those thought patterns and inner critic that's creating this dynamic for you, reach out for help. I'm here to help you. You can go book a consultation with me at consultmelissa.com. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.